Thanks to my colleague from Washington. You know, the level of frustration that we have over this issue is really unparalleled. You know, we hear platitudes here in the United States Senate. They usually start with, "We believe in the will of the people. Let's do the will of the people." Well, guess what? We had this debate. We had the debate about whether we should have an entity called the Export-Import Bank. We had that debate. It was long fought. We shut down the bank for the first time in 60 years. We shut down the bank, stopping exports from the United States of America, costing jobs in the United States of America. We won that fight, and we didn't win it by a little. We didn't win it by just a margin. We won supermajorities in the Senate and supermajorities in the House. When we were told the House would never pass a standalone bill, they passed a standalone bill by 70%. 70% of the vote. Now, doesn't that tell you that the people of this country should have a vote through their elected representatives? And today, you know what's stopping the will of that vote, the will of the people? To have this entity, beyond all the arguments for why this entity is critically important, one person. One person, for whatever reason. This is why people have lost faith with their government. This is why people don't believe that we can get anything done here anymore. Because even though we fight the fight, even though we win the fight, we don't win the fight because we need a quorum at the bank to do any deal over $10 million. We have a nominee, and you might say, well, it must be a raving liberal, right, this nominee? No, it's the Republican nominee that represented and worked with and worked for one of the most conservative members, in fact, an anti-export-import member of the House of Representatives. That's our nominee. There's nothing wrong with this nominee. It's not our side who's debating the legitimacy of a Republican nominee. It's not our side. So how do we really believe in manufacturing and believe in the American dream and believe that we can be part of a global economy when 95% of all potential consumers in the United States of America, or in the world, guess what? They don't live here. And if we're going to be competitive, if we're going to be participating in that global economy, which we must, then we must be competitive. We cannot be competitive without an export credit agency. It's just that simple. And we're not going to be competitive. And so don't say you're for trade or manufacturing when you're not willing to take a risk because some ideologue on the other side has decided that that's a black mark. You know, earlier Senator McCain made a passion plea, and Senator Lindsey Graham talked about heritage. Who's running this place? You know, when the Heritage Society can stop deliberation by simply putting a check mark next to a piece of legislation, and when we have this being once again held up in the back rooms of the United States Senate, not openly, but in the back rooms, who's running the place? And who really believes in trade? Who really believes in manufacturing? Who really believes in the middle class? And I'll tell you, my passion on this doesn't just come because I think it is a horrible, horrible trajectory for the future of our American economy. My passion on this comes when I hear stories, and these are real. They are not pretend stories. When I hear stories that we're going to take our manufacturing out of this country, and we're going to lose jobs, and we're going to lose those jobs very quickly. In fact, we already, when we shut down the bank, lost jobs. But we're going to lose jobs. And you know what I think about? Because this is where I live. This is where I'm from. That factory worker on the floor of that manufacturing facility being given a pink slip and told his job's going overseas, her job's going overseas, because they have a better business climate. Think about that. Have a good job, providing for your family, believe you're doing everything right, and because of a simple glitch here, because of really one person, that person's getting handed a pink slip. Where's the accountability for that? Where's the accountability to that family? When are we going to learn That it is this disruption in American lives that have cost this body and this Congress its reputation. For no good reason. For no good reason. Let me just close before I turn it over to my colleagues here with just a couple statistics, because I get, quite honestly, sick and tired of the characterization that this only applies to large facilities like Boeing and GE and Caterpillar. You know, I am tired of that. Let me tell you, in North Dakota, we have 16 suppliers. These are small businesses. These are people who have done creative things in an environment that you wouldn't think would be successful. And they're suppliers to Boeing. What happens when Boeing can't do a deal? What happens when Boeing moves their operation someplace else and the requirement is that those parts be manufactured in that country? What happens? Guess what? Those 16 manufacturers are injured. Those 16 manufacturers have their lives disrupted through no fault of their own. Not because they didn't produce a quality product, not because they didn't do everything that they needed to do to be successful. You know, just last week, the Wall Street Journal reported that 350 high-paying American manufacturing jobs are headed to Canada. That's a direct result in the lapsed reauthorization back in 2015. I think we can clearly expect many more of these stories, many more of these stories. And I would just ask my colleagues, who is going to go to that manufacturer worker? Who's going to talk to the children who now have a father who no longer has a job, or a mother who no longer has a job, and said, because someone told me, I'm not going to do it. I am not going to support you. I don't represent you. I represent an ideology here. And so this is a tragedy at so many levels. But, you know, I guess I naively thought when you win, you win. And when you win by big majorities, you ought to win for at least more than a day. And so I stand ready to fight this fight. I stand ready to attach and do everything that I can to either get this nomination or to get a patch or legislation that will, in fact, provide opportunities for the bank to function. I will do everything that I can, because when I go to bed at night, I don't think about Boeing and the GE executives. That's not who I think about. I think about that person on the factory line who is working every day, putting food on the table for their children, and how this dysfunction here is costing them their livelihood and their security. That is a tragedy that we can't ignore. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor to my colleague from Indiana.